Hey, what's up you guys, it's Connor, and today we're going to be doing an individual book review for Ravensong by TJ Klune. If you guys don't know, this is the second book in the Green Creek series. The first one is called Wolfsong, and I did a book review for that, and I will leave it up in the card symbol so that you can check it out. This video is going to have some mild spoilers for who is still alive at the beginning of this book. So if you don't want to know who's alive at the beginning of this, maybe just go and watch the first review. But it's going to be really hard to talk about this book without talking about any of the characters that are in it. So take that as you will. This is an adult paranormal male-male romance series which follows different characters in every book. So the first book follows a character named Ox. It follows him as he's learning about werewolves and about the magical paranormal world, as well as developing a relationship with one of the male characters in the first book. This book follows a different main character. The third book follows a third main character. The fourth book follows a different main character. As of filming this, the fourth book is not yet out, but I'm looking forward to it whenever that happens. You've had ample opportunity to click away if you didn't want to be spoiled about any of the surviving characters, so let's get started. This one follows a character named Gordo. At the beginning of the first book, you find out that he has become Ox's stand-in father figure slash uncle slash friend slash mentor. So I really liked him and Ox's relationship in the first book, and when I found out that this second book was going to be about Gordo, I was really excited because I want to see Gordo's life and get inside of his head and see what he's all about. If you need a refresher, Gordo is about 40 years old at the beginning of this book. I think he's 39 and maybe he turns 40, but he is a witch in this paranormal world. He has these tattoos that move around and sometimes they do glow, and the characters make fun of him for that. Throughout the course of this book, you find out what happened with Gordo and this wolf pack, the Bennett wolf pack. You find out why he doesn't really like them, why he doesn't trust them, why he doesn't really want to have anything to do with them, what caused all of it. So a significant portion of this book backtracks and follows Gordo as a child. It also backtracks into the first book. There's a period of time where some of the characters in the first book are not being followed. They have gone off page and are doing things off the page, and you don't really know what's going on, but they eventually come back into the story and all of the first book things happen. So in this book, I found it interesting that we do go back into that section and flesh that out a bit. So you find out what these characters were doing during the first book when they were off the page, and then once it gets through all of that is when the story really gets started and goes forward. That takes about 140 pages to cover all of that. Just know that going in. I also will say that during those first 140 pages, the book is very jumpy. It jumps around from memory to memory, similar to how a memory will trigger another memory for a regular everyday human. So you could be thinking about one thing, it makes you start thinking about something else. That starts you thinking about this third thing, and that's kind of how this first 140 pages goes. You jump around a lot, and so you go from him as a child to him maybe a little bit older, and then maybe going back a little bit and then forward. TJ Klune does a good job of establishing how old Gordo is during each of those parts, but it is jumpy. It does go all over the place, and once I realized that it was basically memories triggering other memories, I was totally fine with that. At first, I was like, what is happening? Again, after the 140 page mark, it becomes a lot more chronological, and you follow events as they're happening instead of jumping around. And if you've read the first book, you know that the love interest for Gordo is Mark, who is the uncle for Joe, Carter, and Kelly, and you follow that romance as it unfolds. As usual with my book reviews, I'm going to go through my pros, go through my cons, give you my rating, and be done. My first and biggest pro for this book are the characters. I got invested in them in the first book, and so following them in this book was equally as satisfying. I really enjoyed that this was in the perspective of Gordo because he's not really a part of the pack. He is, but he's sort of apart from the pack. You know what I mean? Gordo is a huge softie, and he's all talk. The way that he expresses love for people is he basically insults them or tells them he's gonna kill them or whatever, and I just thought that that was really funny. I definitely related to Gordo's sense of hatred for technology. I get so frustrated with technology. The moment something goes wrong, I lose my mind. So I definitely related to Gordo with that. I enjoyed seeing Gordo's view of the Bennett pack throughout the course of this story, how it starts off here, it goes there, it goes here, it goes there, and I enjoyed that ride. I also really liked that because this is following Gordo, we got to see a lot more of Rico, Tanner, and Chris. I said in my first review that I felt like Tanner and Chris get lost a little bit. Rico has a very strong personality, so he doesn't as much, but Chris and Tanner do tend to fade away into the background. I enjoyed in this that they didn't really do that. They're a lot more explored, and although Rico is still the main, like, side character from the garage, Tanner and Chris have a little bit more going on, and so I felt like they started to become more well-rounded in this story. I liked learning about how Gordo and these three guys that work in his shop really grew up together, and they literally have no boundaries. So I enjoyed seeing their interactions and seeing their friendship, how it's grown and how it's stayed so strong throughout so many years. Just them as a unit, I was really enjoying. I said in the first review that TJ Klune is pretty good about making sure that his characters are doing things on their own outside of the main plot of the story. That's the same as in here. A lot of the characters have other things happening. Chris has other things happening in the background. Tanner's doing things in the background. Rico especially is having his girlfriend Bambi in the background. So I was really enjoying that all of these characters are in the story, but have their own stories that we don't necessarily know all about. Again, I really liked seeing Joe and Ox in here. I liked seeing how they have progressed and how their pack has grown and has changed. I really enjoyed following Carter. He is just so funny to me. I really enjoyed that Kelly is starting to come into his own and how he's starting to step out from behind Carter and be his own person instead of like Carter's shadow. I like that Robbie starts to get a bit more of a personality. I'm not sure if I said this already, but Rico is dating someone named Bambi. I really enjoyed Bambi in this. I liked that Jesse gets more time, and I, of course, really liked following Catherine as well because she's such an interesting character. She knows exactly who she is and what she does, and she just continues to do what she thinks is best. And I will say that the person bringing the ridiculous amount of angst to this novel was Gordo. Like, no one else was being so angsty, but Gordo was the angst magnet in here, which I guess makes sense because this is following Gordo. One of my pros for the first book that continued into this one is that I like that a lot of the characters are not straight. A lot of the wolves have very fluid sexualities, so Mark has a very fluid sexuality. A lot of the other werewolves do as well, as I said. Gordo is gay, Ox is bisexual, so I love that all of these characters are exploring themselves and all of that. I think one of my biggest pros for this series is that all the characters end up having relationships with other people before they end up with their like true love or whatever. I like that the characters explore with other people first and then get into their main romance that we're following in this series. Finding one person and ending up with them forever seems a bit unrealistic, so I like that that's in here as well. My next pro for this book is that I was really enjoying the plot. It is a very close continuation of the first book. That said, I think that this series almost benefits from being binged, one right after the other, because this plot in here continues the plot of the first one. There are problems in the first book that are not fully resolved in that book that continue into this one, and it just makes sense to read them one right after another. There are still problems with Omegas showing up and screwing things up, and I like that the problem is actually getting deeper instead of just being the same baseline. The problem is actually a lot stronger than maybe we thought in the first book. I liked that there was a lot more development on the politics of the werewolf world. There are a lot more problems in the politics than we originally thought, and I like seeing those being teased out and explored more. I also like that we got to see other witches in this book. So far we had only seen Gordo and his style of magic, but I liked seeing these different witches and how they had different specialties and the ways they went about doing their spells and everything like that were so different from one another. It was really cool. Similarly to how I felt about the first book where the romance and the plot were well balanced, I thought that the romance in here was also well balanced with the plot. Again, there were all these different problems going on in the background as well as actually showing up that they had to deal with. The characters deal with those things as a priority instead of stopping in the middle of a battle to express their feelings. So definitely appreciated the balance there. And the last pro that I'm going to talk about is that TJ Klune's writing continues, at least for me, to be extremely readable. I get through his books so quickly, and I just love that. I find his books difficult to put down once I start them because I really just want to find out what's going to happen next. Because his writing is so accessible and because it's so easy to get through, I just eat them up. I will say that there's like one explicit sex scene in here, so be aware of that when going into this series. There's actually more explicit sex scenes in the first book, I think. There are some talks about like sex off the page, but there's like one major one in here, if I'm remembering that correctly. As for cons, I didn't love this one as much as I loved the first book. I think that there are a lot of similar beats that this one hit that the first one already hit on. Gordo and Ox have a lot of similarities, and I think that that was done on purpose because Gordo kind of becomes Ox's stand-in father slash uncle slash mentor, etc. Probably because Gordo saw a lot of himself in Ox, but because they are so similar and had similar life experiences, it seemed a little bit like it was being recycled into another character in the same series, if that makes sense. And also, all of the moving pieces in here got a little bit messy. There are all the Omegas. There is Robert Livingstone? I don't know how to pronounce that. There are all the hunters, and they all get tangled up into this huge knot of antagonist mess. There's also a super monologue-y villain in here that I was rolling my eyes at. I just was like, you are so unbelievable right now. Like, your danger level has decreased so much just because of how much you monologue. I was like, shut up and do some dangerous stuff. So because of that, this book didn't seem as high stakes as the first book did. I would have liked for the villains to be a little bit more dangerous in here, like they were in the first book. This book is also super angsty. As I mentioned, Gordo brings a lot of angst into this novel because he's like, you left me, you left me, you left me, which happens in a lot of his books now that I'm thinking about it. It happened in Wolfsong. It also happened in Bear, Otter, and the Kid. I thought it was interesting that it was in here as well. I actually read this book before Bear, Otter, and the Kid, but they all had that element in there. This book continued what the first book did, where the characters all try to control each other and tell each other what they can and can't do. You don't get to tell me this. You don't get to do that. You don't get to say that to me. And it's like, okay, calm down. I mean, even though I'm complaining about it, I still was like, yeah, you don't get to. So I was into it, but I did notice it. And the only other repetitive thing that I really picked up on, besides you left me, and you don't get to do this, was that a lot of the memories in here are relived over and over and over again. For instance, when Gordo first meets Ox, that memory shows up multiple times in here. And yes, it is an important memory, but I don't know why we got told it so many different times. So in the end, I had a lot of pros. I was really enjoying following all the characters and finding out what was happening with them next. I'm so invested in the Bennett wolf pack and wanting them to be happy and to thrive. I know that not all of them are going to get the happy endings that they deserve, but I really want to find out which ones do and which ones don't. Obviously, I was really enjoying this, but I had some cons that kept me from loving it as much as I loved Wolfsong. So I gave this book 4 stars. I still really enjoyed it, but it just wasn't as strong as Wolfsong for me. Still would definitely recommend this series. I am pumped to read Heartsong. Quickly, I did end up reading Lovesong, which is a short story that happens during the first 2 books. It follows a different character that I'm not going to name because I'm going to be super vague about this. I definitely recommend reading this right after you finish Ravensong because it takes place during Wolfsong and Ravensong, so it just makes sense. I did have the wrong expectation when I was going into this. I thought this was going to flesh out the original wolf pack a little bit more, but it doesn't do that. I also thought that it was going to cover maybe a couple of other things specific to this character, but it didn't really touch on those either. It mainly just follows this character as the character is going about doing the things that they do in the first 2 books. I like that it confirms what I had thought about this character while reading the first 2 books, so it was nice to have that validation. It also brought some cool facts about this world and what some of the magical beings in this world can and can't do. But I don't think that this short story is completely necessary. You're not going to be really missing anything if you don't read it. It's just something that if you're a completionist, like I tend to try to be, that you'll enjoy. I ended up giving this like 3 stars. It adds a little bit, but not a whole lot, and it's not really necessary. It is free on his website, so I'll leave it linked down in the description. You can check it out if you want to, but again, not super necessary. So that's going to be my review on Ravensong by TJ Klune. If you liked it, please give it a big thumbs up and comment down below if you've read this book yet. Have you read the first book and are now super pumped to continue along and read the second one? Anything else you want me to know, leave it down below and I'll talk to you guys next time.